You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
We are the Madmen of Masculinity.
Your home for healthy masculinity. We're just real men having real conversations for you.
Hey man, we're back in the studio. It's us. We're live.
It's us. You know, we are. I am Kirk M. Samuel.
And I am Jason B. Kendrick.
And we are the Madmen of Masculinity.
That's right. We're just real men having real conversations for you.
You know why I'm looking at my phone?
Because you're rude and you don't like look eye contact, man. That's you know.
I get nervous with eye contact.
Yeah,
I'm
you
like
should.
a dog.
Yeah,
eye contact to me, that's a sign of aggression.
Right.
To me, that's a sign you want to fight.
Is that from the prison days where
Something
like,
like
don't look me in the eye?
Back on the yard.
Back on the yard.
Back when I was on the yard. I'm looking down at my phone, man, because I'm hitting share.
Oh, that's nice.
I just shared this live stream on my timeline on social medias.
Yeah.
On the interwebs.
But make sure if you want to comment and comment live, go to youtube.com/C/Madmen of Masculinity. You'll get to our YouTube channel. Then you can comment live and we'll make you part of the show.
Mm-hmm. Show enough. You know what I'm saying? Hear what you got to say around the joint. You know what we talking about.
Yeah.
Speaking of what we talking about, what are we talking about, man?
The wounded masculine.
What is that?
Well, it actually came up because you know how you've been sending me stuff and some other people.
Why you got to blame it on me? See, obviously,
I'm telling you the story.
What that is, and all of a sudden you blaming something on me.
I'm telling you the story.
All right.
Because you know how I've been stirring the pot on Facebook.
Yeah,
and some of that stuff you've been planting seeds and be like, hey, post this.
Yeah.
Well, one of those got the attention of one of my friends who's a coach and everything. He's like, you kind of came across as a wounded masculine, and we went down this whole rabbit hole in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it. So I was like, that's actually gonna be a good topic because I would think just like when we talk about father wounds and things, I think 90% of men, if not more, are wounded masculine, have that wounded masculine energy. Because you look at the last 50 years, basically of fatherless homes, single mother homes, mostly feminine influence in raising of men or boys, and then also the common demonizing of masculine energy, of masculinity in general, and most men growing up not even really feeling like men or really knowing what masculinity is or what healthy masculinity could be. And so you have a lot of men who are dealing with a wounded masculine energy or a wounded masculine identity out in the world, and it's causing lots of issues.
So yeah, my theory is most men by far have one of four father wounds. I'm just talking father wounds, and I'm about to bridge that to the other side too. But one of four father wounds: either the father was absent from the home, he was absent in the home, he was abusive, or he set such a high bar that the son could not ever please him.
Right.
And I think most men can relate to one, if not several of those. And so I would say that, yeah, to some degree, that could definitely lead to a wounding of what does it mean to be masculine? Because you got a lot of, we're men, but we don't know what that is. I mean, what is a man? That's not that is a rhetorical question. That's not the whole what is a woman kind of thing, because we already know that's kind of jacked up. But in terms of identity, when we look in the mirror at ourselves, a lot of us are our father's age when we were young and when we were wounded. And so now, a lot of us do wrestle with that question of man, what is a man? I mean, at some point I was a young man, and at some point, I'm going to be an old man, not there yet. At some point I'm going to be an old man, but when did I become a man, and what is that? What does that look like? We have some very skewed definitions of that. And so I think a lot of times, we grow up with these wounds and we don't really know what to do with those. And hurt people, right? And so if you're a wounded man or wounded in your masculinity, then that's going to be transferred to somewhere else.
I think most men nowadays, we just need to acknowledge, because that's the first step to healing, is just acknowledge that there's an issue. And we just need to acknowledge that we have a wounded masculine energy. We have wounded masculinity within us because of a lack of healthy masculinity in the home, of a lack of examples of healthy masculinity, of also the demonization of masculinity across the board, and living in a feminine-centric, worldview right now, where it's all about women and children and men last. And, if you have any kind of sense, if you have any kind of brain power at all, you look out in the world and you're like, why, why am I even trying to be a man? Because no matter what I do, I'm wrong and I lose. If I'm trying to be a good man and I marry what I think is a good woman, and then we have kids and I'm working my butt off, then of course they don't look at the quotient of, if I go out to work hard to make money to provide, then you don't have time. But if I'm available and we have time, then you don't have money. And so either way, you can't win. And so there's a lot of guys now who are checking out because they're like, well, there's no real point for me to even try. And I think a lot of that is leading to even more wounded masculinity, because they feel like it's a losing battle. It's a lose-lose situation because I, as a man, can't win. And so having these discussions kind of sheds a light on the fact that most of us in some way are dealing with that. I know in my situation, not realizing that neglect was really an issue, that neglect led to trauma, and emotional neglect led to certain kinds of trauma, which leads to like disorganized attachment styles. It leads to isolationism and all these different things that I deal with. And that all just kind of can be encapsulated in the wounded masculine.
You end up being, or at least experiencing, feeling, whatever you want to call it, like the tail or the dog that's being wagged by the tail. Where is it the dog wagging the tail or the tail wagging the dog in life? Do I try to be this and then not enough of that? Or do I try to be that and not enough of this? And what happens is you end up feeling frustrated. You end up feeling defeated. You end up feeling basically not enough of any of the things that you're supposed to be, but you don't know what you're supposed to be. So you got culture trying to tell you what you're supposed to be. But of course, culture is going to tell you the most convenient thing for culture in that which you should be. So, if you just default to the culture thing, then you're going to be nice guy. You're going to be nice, pleasant man that never shows up, never shows up angry or never shows up with any kind of real power and strength in the room. You'll be Mr. Softy. You'll be all these kinds of things because that's convenient for the world. You'll grind yourself down to nubs for your family and everybody else around you, and you won't be appreciated until you're gone. I mean, it's one of those things that you can experience, you will experience, especially when you acquiesce. You like that big word?
Mm-hmm.
When you acquiesce to what culture says, to what dating culture says, or to whatever. You're supposed to be, pretty and all this other kind of stuff. You're supposed to look good, and then it can get way out of hand. And all of a sudden, you got to have perfect skin, you got to have perfect hair, you got to be visually appealing. And normally, visually appealing is something feminine, right? I mean, you got to present well, you got to this and that, you got to do all these things. But that's what happens when you kind of give in to what culture, society, the world, whatever it is, says that the masculine should be, and it ends up leaving a man frustrated. It ends up leaving a man angry. It ends up leaving a man, just kind of as a powder keg, easily sparked into some kind of eruption.
Uh-huh.
And that's when bad things happen in our culture. And so, I don't, again, I never go down the victim rabbit hole. I never go down that path. At the same time, I recognize through my own life experience and experiences of what I've seen from other men that this is a reality. This is a reality of a lot of us who are now in our 30s, 40s, 50s, and maybe even a little bit older, who grew up primarily raised by a woman, who was acting artificially in her masculine, and so our template for masculinity came from a woman quite often.
Which, I mean, brings up the point of why we see a lot of ladies like now going, where are all the good men at? And of course, a lot of times they're asking in their late 30s and 40s, so after they've already like run through the train and they haven't actually set down roots with one man and said, this is my man, and we're going to work this out. And pretty much for most guys now, if you are angry, if you're frustrated, if you're isolated, if you have any addiction issues, you are the wounded masculine. And so we're doing this episode really to kind of shine a light on it so that you can say, oh, maybe that's me. And the first step is to acknowledge that and then go, okay, what do I do about that? Well, one of the first things to do about that is to look in your past and maybe get some therapy or counseling just to acknowledge that maybe you have some trauma, maybe you have a father wound, maybe there's some things that you haven't dealt with yet as far as pain and heartbreak and other mental health issues. But then once you kind of start going down that path, it's a matter of letting go of what the world is telling you a man is, letting go of what women are telling you a man is, letting go of all these stories, and then deciding who you are as a man. Because every man is different, but at their core, they're men. There are masculine traits that can be adopted by all of us, but then how that presents within you, or how you present that, or how you decide to be a man in the world is uniquely yours. But what I find a lot, I struggle with, and I think most of us can admit to this, is that when you see how a man is portrayed out in the world, how Hollywood and social media portrays a man, it's not how we are. It's not how I am. And it's not how I necessarily want to be, but it's really hard not to be influenced by that. And then when you're influenced by that, you start to go, oh, well, I must be less of a man because I'm not making $2 million a year and I don't have a, Aston Martin and a big yacht and all these different things. Well, that's not necessarily the man you need to be. And so the bottom line of this is, if you are dealing with wounded masculine energy, instead of pointing that out there and be like, well, it's mom's fault, or it's dad's fault, or it's society's fault, you got to once again come in, look in the mirror and go, who do I want to be? And how can I be the best man that I want to be?
You got to close that loop. Wounded masculinity is an open loop.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to, and when you have an open loop, you end up being incomplete. And through that open loop, either, stuff gets in that shouldn't be in, or stuff gets out that shouldn't be out. Either you act out in ways because it's not closed in a safe container, or you allow things inside of you, into your brain, into your heart, into your spirit, into your soul, into your life that you shouldn't, because you're incomplete and you're looking for something to close that loop. And so you end up, again, it's one of those, the cycle. It's the thing that you do have to not begin looking in the window, but begin looking in the mirror in terms of, okay, what do I need to do to be the most whole, the most complete that I can be, given the scars that I have. There's a difference between scars and wounds, right? Wounds are actively bleeding. Scars are a sign that you've been through some battles and some wars. And so it's okay to have the scars, but we should not be walking around bleeding. And that's a body that has an open loop. Our body is a closed container. And when you have a cut on your body, it's an open wound, it's an open loop, and stuff comes out, or stuff gets in, infections and all that other kind of stuff. And so, so as I picture it right now, I'm picturing that wounded masculinity as an open loop where stuff can get out, or stuff gets in that shouldn't be in.
Yeah, I think as we kind of go through these segments, and we'll get into, like, in the second segment, really examples what wounded masculinity looks like in society, what it looks like in relationships. And then as we go further, maybe we can even encourage you ladies to not shy away from a man who's wounded, but to be his support, because I guarantee you, like in a lot of cases in the world, when you help a man who is working on himself and trying to heal, and you become part of that healing process, you want to talk about a loyal man, somebody that's never going to leave you. Be a part of his healing process and see what happens. Yeah. See who leaves who, or who appreciates who. But that's something we'll get into later. But yeah, I think we'll take a break and come back and talk about what wounded masculinity looks like in society today.
We'll be right back. Mad Men of Masculinity. Bomb diggity.
Trying to keep my thoughts straight, but after 9 hours in the truck, I'm like scatterbrained.
I'd be a zombie. For real. Maybe I would be taking some of that alpha brain.
I did take some with my pre-workout
brain crack you do.
Yeah. I'm trying to get my brain to focus. Focus my brain, make it eye.
You don't trust sunscreen, but you trust alpha brain.
Mm-hmm. I think you need more sunshine now.
Joe Rogan sold sunscreen, you put some on.
Well, if Joe Rogan sold sunscreen, it would be all natural aloe and coconut oil and all this stuff.
They got some sunscreen that
I've seen some, but then they always have these binders and those other chemicals like down the list where you're like, it's like, oh, it's aloe and coconut oil, and then all these triglyceride stuff, and I'm like,
man, you need to put on sunscreen.
No, I need more because dude, look,
all right.
Let's compare. Look and see how dark you are.
Don't even go there, dude. Don't even front.
Trying to get dark.
No.
Speaking of trying to get dark, you better get back on.
Yep. And we're back.
Yes, we are.
Mad Men of Masculinity.
You not gonna do the beeper?
I'm gonna do the beeper, man. I just did the beeper right there.
Okay.
Mad Men of Masculinity, KLDC, 1220 AM in the Mile High City, on the interwebs, everywhere. Facebook, YouTube, all of the podcasts, outlets, all that kind of stuff, man. We be out here.
Yep, we're on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and a bunch of other podcast channels that I don't even know the names of because there's so many of them.
All the things.
But yeah, we're talking about the wounded masculine. And for those of y'all who don't know, a lot of times I do our own memes. I'm really proud of this one. I like having the Black Knight when he's got, from Monty Python's The Holy Grail, he's got no arms, no legs. And he's like, and then put wounded masculine across there because it's kind of how it is. It's like, oh, I got no arms, no legs. It's just a flesh wound. It's just a flesh wound. I'm fine. Rub some salt in it, man.
Because when in society, when somebody is operating out of their wounded masculine, it's first and foremost, I think it shows up in destruction.
Mm-hmm.
Something gets destroyed outside of him, whoever he is, whether it's another person, other people, society in general, strangers, whether it's innocent bystanders, all those kinds of things. But destruction comes out when there is wounded masculinity within.
Yeah, destruction, lack of foundation. I mean, being wishy-washy, being a nice guy, being underhanded or manipulative. All these things come from the wounded masculine because they don't have a natural foundation of masculinity, or even feeling like, I said before, when I used to run men's groups, I mean, across the board, whether they're 18 or 60, most of the guys are like, I just don't feel like a man. And it's part of that not having a good example of masculinity, and then not only not having a good example, but having it demonized, and then having mostly a feminine influence to men and little boys, and then having school systems and other industries that basically trying to train out masculinity from little boys. They want them all to be good little students and good little quiet girls, basically. I mean, want them all to sit there and be nice and pretty and not do anything. Well, we all know as little boys, we need to be rambunctious. We need to be destructive. We need to be running around and roughhousing so that we can understand what it is to be stronger and where the limits are. And you can't know the limits if you don't push the limits or cross the line. And that's why having fathers in the home is so important to teach that, because mothers a lot of times just can't, because it's not in the feminine nature to roughhouse, not in the feminine nature necessarily to be, hitting each other or be physically aggressive or whatnot. And that's part of the masculine nature. And you got to have that trial period, that learning process of these are the lines you don't cross, and this is how far you can go, and this is how you become a man. And a lot of times that's just not even allowed. I see a lot of moms going, hey, stop roughhousing, or just go, why can't you just be quiet and sit over in the corners like that? And so in a way, they're not allowing the boys to explore their masculinity or to explore that part of themselves. And that's a lot of times we see in schools. They're like, just sit there and be quiet. But if a boy can't sit still, then, he's ADD or ADHD, or he's got this issue or that issue. Let's give him drugs. No, he's just a boy. He's just bored.
Masculinity is not a feeling. It's an identity. It ain't something that you feel your way into. It is something that you grab onto, you hold onto, and you accept as an identity, and you operate out of that identity. And one of the things that we miss by not having a true masculine in the home is being able to see that identity play out in a family or a home structure. And so culturally speaking, because we haven't seen that at home, we either associate it with something that you got to feel like being or doing, or we just assume that it doesn't exist, and when it shows up is scary and all that kind of stuff. Because sometimes the identity of masculinity, the identity of being a man, is you show up as dangerous, but dangerous doesn't mean bad. Dangerous could mean good. Mm-hmm. I mean, the police officer, and obviously I'm talking about the good cops, they all show up and they got a gun on their hip along with a baton and, pepper spray. They show up armed, with it on their belt, and you can see it. Even here in Colorado, we're Second Amendment state. You got guys concealed carrying, open carrying, all that kind of stuff. The guy that's carrying, he's not necessarily bad, even though in theory he could be dangerous. So being a man is not, it's an identity. It's something that we accept who we are, and we operate and we live out of that. We don't just feel our way into it or feel our way out to it. You can't cosmetically get into it. Botox ain't going to help you. I mean, none of that kind of stuff. Like, it ain't a feeling kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an identity kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, to quote Jordan Peterson, a good man is a very dangerous man that has the danger under control. A nice guy is not a good man. A nice guy is manipulative and underhanded because he can't hold his ground. He doesn't have a good foundation and he's not being honest with you. And so a lot of times what we're being taught is to be a nice guy. And we wonder why we have so many guys acting out and doing manipulative things or underhanded things or, not acting in a strong masculine way, because they don't feel strong because they have not been allowed to train their strength. They've not been allowed to learn the limits of, how dangerous can you be and then pull that back. Because a truly good man is a dangerous man who's willing to die for his family, who's willing to protect his home and his nation and his community. But if you're just a nice guy and you've never trained, you've never explored that side of yourself, if you've just been told to be a good little boy, then there's that whole side of you, there's a whole half of you, that kind of aggressive physical side of masculinity that we all need to explore, that all we need to have an awareness of, an experience of, that you don't get. And then you wonder why these guys are always coming out sideways, or we have all these different issues coming from he was such a nice guy. Well, he didn't have any outlet or any healthy outlets for that part of his masculinity or that part of his personality. And when we don't have outlets for the dark side or the anger or the frustration, then it comes out in a negative, destructive way.
And what happens in a culture and a society where masculinity is not present in a home, where a good man is not present in the home, then a woman becomes those things, and then she all of a sudden has to do things based on identity, not because she feels like doing it or not. Thereby, she is not able to operate out of her feminine, which is feeling based. And so she's got to do stuff whether she feels like it or not. She's got to do things that women don't like doing. Women don't like taking out the trash. Women don't like pumping gas at the gas station. I mean, women don't like killing spiders, et cetera, et cetera. But when she is the only one there in the family or in the household, then she's got to do all of these things that are identity based, that are not feeling based, and she's not able to operate out of the place where she's gifted to operate out of. Thereby, and I can't even hold this no more, thereby, she ends up operating out of wounded masculinity.
Yep.
And so it becomes this vicious cycle where he's not there and she's operating out of the woundedness of him not being there, which him not being there is, creates wounded masculinity in itself. So it ends up being this vicious cycle. And then the kids see this,
Yep.
and the kids think that's normal. They think it's normal for mom to not have an outlet.
Mm-hmm.
They think it's normal for mom to, always be stoic and always have to do what she has to do and not what she wants to do. And they think that's normal for mom to be, wounded masculine.
Yeah.
And then you got the modern feminist woman that is pushing the narrative that women need to be this, and you got to be whatever. You got to be boss babe, which is something that real boss babes are not. I mean, we've had a boss babe legit in the studio not too long ago that wasn't nothing like what, modern feminism would say that boss babes got to be. So ironically, women end up operating out of wounded masculinity because they are trying to be the masculine that they are not equipped to be in a household, in a family, or just even in society.
Well, and it comes back to the fact that they're not built to be masculine because they're naturally feminine. Now, there are some women who are. I mean, we've seen some of those, and some of them, excel at that kind of masculine energy. But for the most part, most women are mainly feminine. And so, like you said, they have to play a role. So they're being masculine out of a need, not out of a want, not out of a natural proclivity to be masculine. And so, yeah, they're basically operating out of a wounded masculine energy because they don't want to be that. They're having to be that. And you see a lot of times, especially in like lower income households, so like that, how you talk about some toxic masculinity, some of these moms, just how they operate. And, they're very hard-handed, very heavy-handed. There's, the kind of iron-fisted mom. You get a lot of that because they're having to operate in that, like, I'm having to be mom and dad. So I'm going to be what I think masculinity is, or my own version of it. But because they're not allowed to be their natural feminine essence, because there's not that natural masculine essence there to balance them, then they're coming at it from a wounded masculine place, which is part and parcel of an exacerbation. I mean, not only does the lack of a healthy masculine influence, a father figure in the home, lead to a wounded masculine son. But then having a mother operating out of a wounded masculine energy because she's having to play this role that she's not built for, doesn't want to, exacerbates the wounded masculinity in the son. So you wonder why we have such a generational issue of nice guy syndrome, wounded masculinity, and a lot of men not feeling like men or not sure what a man is, and then operating out of what Hollywood depicts as a man or what social media tells them a man is, and then it's not healthy. It's not a healthy, grounded, masculine, foundational man.
Very few women want to operate out of their masculine. Very few. I mean, minute amounts of women want to, like, willingly, happily operate out of their masculine. It's just not fun for women. And women that do that end up, you just look at them, they're just mad. Mm-hmm. But very few women, very few really want to operate. They will if they have to, but they don't want to. And when they have to, especially when they have to for a long period of time, it goes dark.
It's detrimental.
It goes to dark places where there's an underlying seed of resentment just for the role that they have to play, not the role that they get to play when they want to play that thing. And so, so again, it ends up being this vicious cycle. And then again, when you involve kids in that, then you got the next generation with one of those 4 father wounds, and on top of that, what's acted out in addition to that father wound is a mother that's acting out of her masculine, unwillingly and angrily, and it's just not a pretty place to be.
It's not pretty, but it's also unhealthy for her.
Very.
She needs to be operating in her feminine. That's a healthy space for her. That's a healthy energy for her when she's got to operate out of her masculine. And not only is that unhealthy for her, it's unhealthy for the kids as well. And we've talked about the statistics, and it's not pretty out there.
I mean, and sometimes you need that man in the house to tell everybody, including her, no.
Yep. Sit down.
No to something.
No.
Like, no to something. Like, no, you're not going to go get, 50-11 needles in your face. You don't need, lips like a duckbill. You don't need 4-inch eyelashes. I mean, you don't need a windshield forehead. Yeah. Like, no, baby, you don't need that. I mean, you look beautiful the way you are.
Well, and you just have to look at, there's plenty of examples. I mean, if you want to go on YouTube or on TikTok or any of these things, of just the difference in a masculine energy and a feminine energy. And when especially a little boy is acting out and is tired and is freaking out, and you're like, go to bed, and no, he's freaking out, and mom's trying to get him to go to bed and he won't. But as soon as that father walks in with that masculine energy, because he is dangerous, there is a subtle threat of violence, then that boy goes to bed. Boom. Speaking of going to bed,
we're gonna put this segment to bed. We love our sponsors. We love all the breaks. Shout out to Crawford Broadcasting.
Yes, sir.
Tanner, my man, doing his thing back there on the 1s and 2s. Best producer in the world.
Because he's one we can afford.
Yeah, he's the one we can afford right now. Even though he looks at other podcasts while we're on the air, but we ain't gonna hold that.
Hey, we gotta accept what we can get, man.
So we'll be right back. Mad Men of Masculinity on KLDC.
Sorry, Tanner.
We ain't gonna hold that over your head forever, but just for a long time. Just for a long time. We got to make sure that we keep you grounded.
Don't want you to get a big head. We know how those girls are. Oh, you work in radio? Oh my God, you work with a madman? Oh my God, man, you're so cute. Ooh.
Oh man, I wanna. Yeah, you should go on the Bachelorette, man, or the Bachelor.
Yeah, you should be the Bachelor.
You should do that. Man.
You should be.
Probably not, man. But you should go. Yeah. You got to do the Bachelorette, because then it'd be you and a bunch of other guys, and they'd be all, you be the one kind of chilling in the cut, you securing your stuff. They got their shirts ripped off trying to
see. That's why he's got to be the Bachelor, so he's the only dude in there, and he gets to deal with all the craziness.
Right, yeah. Just doing your thing, man. Just waiting in the cut.
Catch me if you can.
Waiting in the cut. We're back.
Yes, we are.
Mad Men of Masculinity.
Right here on KLDC.
12:20 a.m.
This is the Mile High City.
Mile High City of Denver, Colorado, and on the interwebs everywhere. Somebody in Croatia is listening to us right now. Yep. Shout out Croatia.
I'm sorry it's so late over there.
Shout out Bosnia, Herzegovina. I don't know, man. The Olympics ain't on yet, man. I don't know all these country names yet, man. Give me a couple weeks when the Olympics come on. I'll know all the countries.
It used to be Yugoslavia, if you want to get back into history.
What?
Last time I was there,
Bosnia?
Bosnia Herzegovina used to be Yugoslavia.
For real?
Yeah, it's right above.
Does
Czech
Yugoslavia
Republic.
still exist?
No, it's
so
split.
they
It's
changed
split.
it. Oh, okay.
Just like when it used to be the used to be Czechoslovakia,
Yeah.
now it's the Czech Republic and Slovakia. Those are two different states. So Yugoslavia used to be a state, and then it split into Bosnia and Herzegovina.
So why don't they have like one country named Yugo and the other country named Slava? Or
why would you want to be called Yugo?
I don't know. That's where they make the cars.
Mm-mm.
That ain't where they make the cars?
I don't think so.
For real?
I don't think so.
I thought they made Yugos in Yugoslavia.
Maybe it is.
I don't know, man.
So of course I could be talking on my butt. That's just what I remember.
And then when the Olympics come on, man, I'm gonna know all the countries. But shout out wherever you are, man. Montenegro and
Monte Carlo, we need
lower something and upper something in Madagascar and somewhere, man. All the countries. I don't know.
I'm gonna go to Madagascar and give me a lemur.
I went to public school, man.
There's still the internet, man. You got Google Earth. You can look at everything.
That's true.
Unless you're one of those flat earthers, and there's.
I ain't one of them.
It's just weird.
Not at all.
It's weird to me.
I've been on a ship I've been on a ship in the ocean. I've seen the horizon.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I ain't that guy. But anyhow, man, we digress.
Digressing, talking about wounded masculine. We don't want to talk about it.
I'm wounded. I'm wounded in my masculine world country knowledge.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So what do we do about it? Let's talk about it. Because we
That's
talk
a good
about what it
question,
is
man.
and how it affects the world. What do we do about it?
That's a great question. That is a fantastic question. I wish I had the answer. No, I think
we got steps. We got no answers.
We know all the problems. We don't know all the answers. You got to look it begins in the mirror, man. It begins in the mirror. I've been there. We both been there where,
been there, done that, still there.
That wounded masculine kind of, and it does seep out of all of us. And so we gotta learn how to tame that lion, man. We gotta learn how to tame that thing. We gotta learn how to patch up that wound and allow it to heal into a scar. But it all starts in the mirror.
Yeah, it starts off with acceptance, the fact that you have to acknowledge the fact that you probably have a wounded masculine energy. And it's at this point, it's like a lot of other things where probably majority of us, not all of us, have it or have some aspect of it. And so once you accept that, if you don't accept it, if you ignore it, then there's no way to deal with it. There's no way to address it. There's no way to heal it. So acknowledging it and then going, okay, what do I do with that awareness? What do I do with that knowledge? Well, you have to develop either several things, a group of friends around you, a therapist or some sort of support system, and then healthy coping mechanism. Majority of us, and me as a prime example, spend most of our time using unhealthy coping mechanisms to deal with the wounded masculine and a lot of times the wounded masculine comes from the stray thoughts that we haven't learned to control, the stray thoughts that we actually believe are true, the thoughts of like, oh, well, I don't, have a $4 million house and all this stuff like that, so I must not be a man. Well, that's just a thought. That doesn't necessarily mean it's true. And maybe if you had a $4 million house, you'd hate it because that's a lot of maintenance. It's a lot of taxes. But
and that's what I mean by, man, you got to learn how to control that line. You got to learn how to tame that thing. You really do. I mean, and once you begin to do that, once you learn how to do that, and all of us have one in us. Like all of us have one in us, man. And if you don't tame it, it's going to hurt you. It's going to hurt other people around you. If you don't tame it, I've been there, done that. If you don't tame it, it's going to make a lot of people around you cry. If you don't tame it, you're going to be sleeping in the back of your car. If you don't tame it, you're going to think your life is better without life. If you don't tame that thing, it's going to come after you, and it's going to keep attacking you, keep hunting you, keep prowling on you. I mean, you got to learn how to tame that lion, man, and that lion is on the inside of each and every one of us.
Yeah, and there's a big, there's that old story, the Native American story of the you got the black lion or the black wolf and the white wolf within you, and it's all about the one you feed. Well, the true story is it's really about if you feed them both, they don't fight. If you acknowledge them both and honor them both, and that's part of that. Being a good man means you're a dangerous man. So you have to be able to acknowledge the fact that you have these things within you, and what do you do with that? Every one of us as a man can, for the most part, most of us can physically harm somebody. So you have to know what to do with it. You have to know that I can physically harm somebody. And so that is a capability of mine. It doesn't make me bad, right, or wrong. It just means that is something I'm capable of. And if you don't think you can do that, then maybe you need to train yourself so that you can, because there is a confidence and a foundation that comes from the ability, knowing you have the ability to do harm. That makes you a better man to know that you can, but you don't, versus being somebody who needs to and can't. It's kind of like insurance. You want to make sure you have it and don't need it versus need it and don't have it. And you have to acknowledge the fact that we have both sides, light and dark, good and bad, whatever. And a lot of those things are just perceptual. Do you think having to take somebody out. I don't know how to say that on the airways.
Yeah.
If somebody kept broke in your house, you had to take them out. Is that morally right or wrong? Well, he just broke in your house and he's a threat. And you as a man, as a protector, need to be able to take him out.
Double tap.
So that is part of who you are. And if you don't have that ability or you don't think you do, then that's part of probably why you have a wounded masculine energy, because you don't feel, every man needs to feel like he can protect, provide, preside, be the leader in his home. If you don't have that ability, you don't think you have that ability, that's probably part of the reason you feel like you have a wounded masculine energy.
You know, one of the things that I have realized and have come to accept is that I do have a shadow side, that there is part of me.
And there's strength in that.
There has been parts of me throughout the course of my life. Well, that part of me throughout the course of my life has done a lot of damage. And that part of me, because, and I think back to those periods of time, I always wanted to shy away from that. Like I never wanted to, you know, I wanted to run from that, or I wanted to somehow kill that. And, you know, I think Batman is really a villain when you study the character. He's really a villain that's, you know, he is the Dark Knight, but he hates bad guys, right? And so, you know, you can be a superhero even through your dark side. You can use that to fuel some fire. If you ever been in a gym and you ever been, you know, under some serious weight, you know, you don't hit personal records. You don't hit PRs in the gym without going to the dark place. I mean,
well, it's fuel.
It's one of those, like, you got to get angry to put up some serious weight. You know, not too long ago, I found myself in a vehicle. It was an Uber, and I was on Las Vegas Boulevard. And for some reason, the moment just hit me, the spot where I was. To my left was the Mandalay Bay. To my right was an empty parking lot. It's still empty today. And I flashed back to the moment. This is exactly the spot where some man barricaded himself up on the 30-something floor of that Mandalay Bay. And I can't tell what window because it's all patched up now. And this guy decided to rain down hell from that window onto a parking lot full of innocent people right here in this very spot. Yeah. And to see, you know, sometimes when you go to places and you see how close it is, like if you've ever been to Dealey Plaza in Dallas, you realize the book depository is like right there. I mean, but to be on that spot and to realize that the Mandalay Bay is right there, that parking lot is right there. That man had a shadow side that he just allowed to do massive amounts of destruction. And
well, that's what happens when you don't accept, acknowledge, and work with.
Right.
When you try to hide from it, when you try to say, I don't have a shadow side, I don't have a bad side, you like, I don't have a wounded masculine energy, and you hide from that, you don't accept it, you don't acknowledge it, you don't work with it, then it comes out sideways.
Right.
It comes out in these unhealthy ways, just like that. Like when you have the school shooter, it's because he wanted to be the good little boy and didn't acknowledge that he was angry, frustrated, and you know, wanted to do some harm to himself or somebody else because he wasn't feeling loved and accepted. And part of that is loving and accepting yourself, which means you got to look at all sides and go, hey, I've got a dark side. Yeah. If I don't acknowledge that dark side, it's going to come out negative.
And where I was going before you rudely interrupted me on that was
what happened?
No, nothing. This guy ended up barricading himself into a room. How many of us end up barricading ourselves into dark caves because we haven't learned how to grapple with that dark side of us, that dangerous side of us, that side of us that can be destructive? And when we learn how to do that, when we learn how to live and play that dance, we don't have to be afraid of that. We can not barricade. We can let that out. We can let that roam, even if it is at the zoo, you know, whether it's the zoo or Siegfried and Roy or whatever, or the circus, whatever. But when you learn how to respect that lion, when you learn how to feed it in the healthy ways and to not allow it to take over, then you find yourself not having to barricade yourself from the world. You find yourself being able to free and to be free and to be roaming around like you're in the Masai Mara in Africa.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I think we have such a kind of epidemic of this wounded masculine energy, is because most men don't feel free to express themselves. They don't feel free to be masculine. They're not even sure what that is. They don't feel free to have a dark side or to be dangerous or to be someone who can be a protector and provider and a leader. So when we don't have those outlets, I mean, it's all energy. It's all going to, and energy is always in motion. It's always got to come out. So if you don't learn how to harness that energy, like you're talking about the gym, when you get under that weight or you get in a stressful situation, you can't harness that anger or that frustration or that darkness. You can't harness that and become, you know, in alignment. And that's one of the things that we talked about before. Like they actually at the Heart Math Institute showed that the energy of authenticity is like 400 times more powerful than love. We've all been told that love is the most powerful energy. Well, authenticity comes from being a whole person. That means harmonizing your light and your dark side, harmonizing all of you and working with that and loving all parts of you and knowing that even anger has uses, even violence has uses, even all these things that we are told that are dark and bad and about ourselves, they have uses, but we don't utilize them in the proper way. We don't balance those things. Then comes out sideways and negative. And that's what we're saying. Having an awareness of your maybe wounded masculine energy and learning how to accept it and cope with it and find healthy outlets, whether it's martial arts, going to the gym, therapy, or all the above. That's how you find a balance and authenticity. You're finding out who you really are. So you don't feel triggered by Hollywood and social media telling you what a man is when you go, no, this is who I am. I'm a man. And this is who I am as a man.
And that's one of the, this whole concept is one of the things that may sound weird to a lot of people in terms of recognizing and honoring your shadow side. That's part of you. That, I mean, we all have traumas, right? And so you got to honor your traumas, even through, allowing your dark side, your shadow side to, the opposite of the shadow side is your light side, right? And so, being able to honor that one side gives power to the other side, in my opinion. And when you operate out of that, you do accept the fact that in this identity, I'm not dependent on what the world says I have to be. That beginning of the identity of man or manhood or being a man of masculinity starts with a no, I am this. It's those two words. I am this. Like, this is me, and I am who I am, even in my masculinity in this particular way.
Yeah, and you can't have light without the dark. You can't have dark without the light. Just like you can't have up without down. Like this dualistic nature, that's why you need to be aware of and accepting of both sides.
Yeah. And this is, these are, like I said, these are things that I spent most of my life trying to kill my shadow side, trying to kill the side of me that was addicted, that broke up families, that made kids cry and all these kinds of things. And I realized that, okay, man, that shadow side of me gives me insight, as a matter of fact.
Mm-hmm.
When I talk to somebody about the same addiction that I had, man, I'm going like straight past go. Collecting $200 all the way around the board. Because I can speak directly into that dark place. And so, having that dark place, having even a bad history, man, gives you a superpower that other people don't have. And speaking of a superpower,
we're gonna take a break.
Let's do our last superpower break here. We'll be right back. Mad Men of Masculinity.
No.
Yep.
So it's hard for him to do everything for 8 hours a day. However, this lady today at the apartment complex was telling me, like, I don't come get the keys for something today and show them their renter's insurance. They're not like there would be a problem. She was saying it's like very important that I can do that. Mm-hmm. But if I'm not even moving in until like 17, why have renter's insurance for 9 days when I'm not in there yet and something could happen?
Yeah, you can actually set your renter's insurance up for the day you move in.
Right, that's what
yeah, mm-hmm. just set it up for the day you move in, because they just want to know that you have it. It's kind of like their checklist. They just want to know that you have renter's insurance to give you the keys. For them, all they're doing is get first and last, get the renter's insurance and get you in there, and then they don't want to hear from you unless you don't pay rent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to communicate with them. He has paid everything. I already paid my share, so they know we're good for it, but the way she was like, still, you need to
yeah. Yeah. A lot of times you get dealt with by the lowest common denominator, so they'll have some deadbeats who they gotta like. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is they get measured. Their performance. They have numbers that they got to report, right? With so if I just look down at my calendar, you got to know, like, a lot of their numbers close out on the 9th or the 10th of the month. So, you know, a lot of apartment complexes, it's like you get a late fee if you pay on the 9th as opposed to the 8th or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So
Well, and it boosts,
yeah,
it
they're
boosts
under
their numbers,
deadlines
yeah.
in terms of when they got to have certain numbers to report cutoff wise. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can give them, if you get it through your car insurance and post date it till the 19th, you can show that you have it, but it doesn't start till then. But well, just let her. I mean, if they're not giving it away, if there's not like some issue, then just like, hey, we don't move until the 19th. I'll have it all by the 17th or the 15th or whatever, and just tell her
But
to
you're
calm
saying
down.
that they're acting like you're not going to get the specials if you don't.
I don't know about that, but just how she has talked to me.
Oh, she's just being pushy.
Yeah.
And I think the reason she's being pushy is because they got to report on the 9th or the 10th of the month.
Right, probably her. She's trying to boost her numbers.
Right. Right. They're trying to boost. They got to report occupancy and move-ins, move-outs, all that kind of stuff. So she's just trying to get books wrapped up.
Yeah.
But that's
Don't let her pressure you, man. You do
Well,
your thing.
But that's probably why she's pushing more so now, like specifically like these days, because I believe it's like the 9th or the 10th of the month they got to report.
Yeah, because
to
a lot
their
of places you're not even late paying rent until like the 5th or the 6th.
Right. Yeah. But
All right, well,
that's why it's time.
Well, that was a big old segue. Sorry, everybody. We had a question from our man Tanner about rent and stuff. So
Yeah.
we're
That's how we do, man. That's how we do.
old man advice.
We pause for the
Don't worry about
cause
that,
for our
lady.
man. Pause for the cause for our main.
What were we
man
talking
chat.
about again?
I don't even know. Last segment.
Yeah, we're back.
Yep, we're back
This
here.
is the Mad Men Masculinity Show.
That's right, Mad Men of Masculinity.
And if you stuck with us through that last break, thank you for sticking with us because we had a question from the peanut gallery and we had to dig into it.
We're just doing some life tech support.
Life tech support. We're doing some old man knowledge over here.
We're just passing down some wisdom, some life wisdom tech support for our main man.
But that's what we're here for. You know, we're here for y'all. We're here for him. We're here for everybody.
Man, that's what we.
Just trying to help out.
That's what we do.
So what are we talking
coming
about?
down the home stretch. We're talking about wounded masculinity,
that's right.
man, and you know, and we're talking about the shadow and the light.
Yeah, I love that we talked about that the whole shadow and light thing because I think that's part of why there's so much wounded masculinity as well. You know, not only is it the feminine influence, but the fact that a lot of men don't accept or haven't been taught how to accept their shadow side, or that they need to be dangerous, or they need to be capable of taking care of themselves instead of being a soft, sunflower out in the world. You know, you got to be a balanced person.
And because in a I'm gonna say a Fem-Centric world structure, when you're young, namely school, we're told not to be boys.
Mm-hmm.
We're, like you said earlier, we're told to sit down, be quiet, sit at nice little organized desks, all these other kind of things. You know,
don't be rambunctious.
Be quiet. Don't do any of that kind of stuff. And so, we are, and this is not a right or wrong kind of, this is just the way it is. So in those formative years, we're kind of in a lot of ways programmed out of what could be considered, or what is considered, masculinity or a healthy masculine pattern. And so, so when we get older, it's like, man, what is that groove supposed to look like? What do those train tracks look like? And we don't recognize it because, we were told to not be that through the formative years.
Yeah, and one thing I want to do with this episode, especially because we do have a lot of ladies that watch us because they're smart and they want to hear from men what healthy masculinity is. One thing that if you are aware that there is a wounded masculine, if you're dealing with a man who may have wounded masculine energy, being able to support him with that, especially if he's trying to heal it, that's one way to really gel that bond. That's one way to really become a very supportive member of the partnership. Because I think a lot of times we as men aren't even aware of our wounded masculinity. And when you have somebody who reacts a certain way over something that should be small, or it's just a small, something that you don't think is that big because it's a trigger to his masculinity or his wounding. And so being aware that us as men and women, we all have our triggers and traumas and things like that. And being aware that not only is there wounded masculinity, there's wounded femininity nowadays. There's, everybody's wounded and traumatized. So having some sort of empathy, having a little bit of awareness that, oh, maybe, we tend to take things so personally. Oh, he reacted this way or she reacted that way, and somehow I'm bad or wrong. Just understanding that maybe that's just triggering part of their wounding, and having some empathy, and being able to hold space and go, well, what's that about? Let's talk about it. Let's get to the bottom of it. Let's not talk about this issue. It's not an issue. Whatever you're saying it is, it's not that. There's something else behind it. Let's talk about the real thing.
And tending to those wounds look different for him than they do for her. Tending to those wounds for him, because ideally, like you go from the wound to the scar, right? And so for him, that looks like doing some work. You got to do some work, or you got to do some work, man. There's no other way around it. I mean, work is part of being a man.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, what is a man that doesn't work? You know, I mean, he's an inmate or he's a deadbeat, right? And so, you know, so for the man, it's you got to do the work, man. You got to do the work, whether it's therapy, counseling, get in circles and groups of men. You can't have your masculinity defined by femininity. Women can't tell you what it looks like or what you should do to be a man. Well, if you were a real man, you would do this. If it's coming from a woman, it's wrong. It's bad tech support. So you need to get in circles of men and allow that. So it takes a man to make a man, and it takes men to raise up men, right? And so you need to get in those circles of men, but that's part of the work you got to do. It's mandatory. I mean, we were made to be like that. For her, that healing of that wound to the scar is patience. She needs patience with him as he works through that thing, as he works through, you know, whatever issues he has. I mean, if she's been wounded by a man, and so has he. And so she wants patience. She wants benefit of the doubt. She wants grace. Give him all of those same things. Give him time to do his work. Give him time to, you know, sometimes give him space to be human. Give him space to not know, to not figure. I mean, it's like when you get some furniture or something from IKEA, you open up a box and there's no instructions. And you just got like a pile full of junk all over the place with these weird tools and bolts and nuts, and you just got to figure it out. I mean, you know, there's no instructions, and the instructions for getting outside of the box are written on the outside of the box. And so he's going to have to figure some of this stuff out, and it's going to take some patience and some grace and some latitude and all the same things that you want, you know, woman, to help you get through all of your scars and all those kinds of things, whatever those look like. And whether that's him reacting badly to an argument or something like that, trying to figure stuff out. I had to open up to my wife recently that, man, I got abandonment issues. And so when we had that fight, and not fight, you know, we had that argument, and some of that stuff got triggered, man, that took me to a bad place. And you know, maybe I shouldn't have reacted the way I did, but, you know, unfortunately I'm working through that still. So she needs patience. He needs to do the work.
Well, and that's the thing, as you would assume in a relationship that you would have more patience with each other because you want to work together and you want to support each other. It tends to be nowadays that we have less patience in the relationship than we do in a workspace or with friends or with, you know, external family. And so we need to prioritize the patience and understanding and work, because that's what it is. Men need to work through whatever the issue is, because a lot of times we don't know what it is. We need to take that time to dig in. Like you were saying, you know, why did I react this way? Oh, that relates to my isolationism or my abandonment issues or my emotional neglect from childhood. And doesn't have anything really to do with my partner. But when we start to when we think everything has to be perfect, when we think everything, you know, as soon as you have an argument or disagreement or something, somebody reacts a certain way, then that's it. We're not, you know, oh, I guess we're not perfect for each other. We're not meant to be together, which is a thought that used to go through my head all the time in all my old past relationships. It's like, oh, I guess I'm not perfect, so I'm not good enough to be in a relationship. I guess I'm not perfect, so maybe this isn't the relationship I should be in, when it was just an opportunity to dig in, have a little patience, a little empathy, and find out what's behind it. Because we tend to look just so surface when it comes to relationships and arguments and think, oh, well, that he's reacting a certain way, so that has to be about me. Well, no, that probably triggers something from way back and has nothing to do with you, but it's just a trigger. It's a soft point. It's a you know, nerve. Like when you got a cavity and you got that nerve exposed, it's like just something hits and you're like, oh, we all have that experience. But when we are in that moment, and that's why I preach so much about counting to 10, taking, you know, if you're reacting negatively and you're both in your feelings, now you're both out of your mind. You are literally not intelligent right now. You're both reacting out of survival. So you need to take time, take a break, go to your neutral corners, count to 10 or take an hour, then come back once you calm down and you've had some time to process and go, well, And then start asking those questions. What did you hear me say? What I heard you say was, you start having these conversations, trying to dig down to the fact that a lot of times we don't even hear each other. I say a certain thing, she hears another thing. She says a certain thing, he hears another thing, and then we react by what we think we heard, and we make up these stories. But it has nothing to do with what actually happened. So being patient and giving grace and going, okay, that's not the reaction I expected. What's going on? What's behind that? And then having those conversations.
And recognizing that even when a wound becomes a scar, it's still not, or it's still a sensitive place.
Sensitive.
You can have, I got a scar right here in the middle of my forehead, right? And I ran into a trash dumpster when I was young and bust open and whatever. I got stitches in my head. So that little spot right there is more vulnerable than the rest of the skin on my face, because at one point it was open and it was bleeding profusely all over me and everybody else, and it had to be stitched up and healed up. And so he may have those wounds that can become scars. Understand that that scar can still be a sensitive place when it comes to the whole journey of this healing.
Yeah.
Just because it's not a wound anymore, just because it's not bleeding, doesn't mean it's not vulnerable. And he can be very vulnerable in the places where he was once wounded.
Well, it's just like, ladies, you want us to have patience during that certain time of the month when your emotions are higher and thing, you're a little more, angry and can be triggered more easily. It's a similar sort of thing. And I think when you have these conversations and you start kind of going down this path, and you can actually make it more fun almost when your partner reacts a certain way and it's not you. You've had these conversations, you've done some of the work, and you realize, oh, this is a trigger. It's like, oh, is that a trigger? What's that trigger about? And then you can actually start maybe helping each other heal instead of reacting. You want to be able to respond. Being able to respond is being responsible, the ability to respond. And that is something that I think a lot of us lack in our relationships. We're always reacting. We're always reacting emotionally. And when we react emotionally, we're usually reacting out of trauma response. We're acting out of survival response. We're not acting out of our prefrontal cortex or our conscious mind or even out of logic. We're just reacting because of an emotional trigger. And a lot of relationships I've had, I see a lot of them out there today, which is like crazy that it just seems like it's just emotional trigger after emotional trigger after emotional trigger. There's not a lot of relating or conversating or even communicating.
That is one piece of evidence. That is one attribute to a wounded masculine, is when you react outside of your base, especially in a moment of heated argument, heated discussion with a woman. A woman should not cause you to move off of your spot. They will, and they will try to, as part of their tempting and testing of being feminine. I told my wife, I'm like, you're a woman, you're going to test me. That's just what you do. That's what you're going to do. You're going to continually test me and try to push me off of my spot as a way to ensure your security. Because if you can push me off my spot, then to you, or if you can't push me off my spot, then to you, that equates to you being safe, because I am grounded. And so if I'm acting out of my wounded masculinity, then and able to be pushed off of my spot, then it makes you feel less safe. And ultimately it makes me feel the same way. And so one of the telltales of operating out of that wounded masculinity that we as men need to get a hold of is, I'm not going to allow another person, particularly a woman, but even another dude, to push me off of my spot.
Yeah. I mean, if you are constantly reacting, if you are a reactive person, you are operating out of a wounded masculinity, or you're just operating out of wounding, period. But if you're reactive, because the whole reason we react to most things is because at some level we either believe it's true or we're afraid it's true. And if somebody come up and called you a blue kangaroo and you're like, I ain't a blue kangaroo, it doesn't affect you because you don't believe it's true and you're not even afraid it's true. But a lot of these things and these buttons and these traumas are our responsibility to heal. And it comes down to us actually taking the time to look at it and go, okay, I was triggered by that. Why? And digging in and taking the time to find out what that is, and then making it a strength. Because a lot of times when you go through the process of acknowledging, accepting, and healing those traumas, they become strengths. Just like Kirk was talking about, he can go deeper with somebody who's dealing with the same thing he dealt with because he's acknowledged it, healed it, and turned it into a strength. So that's all we're asking for you guys, is to get around other guys so that you can start going through this process of healing to take that wounded masculine energy and turn it into a strength. And so you can be a pillar. You can be a rock that's not moved by all the waves and winds of femininity in the world and everything out there. You can be that person that can stand strong in your masculinity. That's your own brand of masculinity that you have decided for yourself, not what somebody else told you it is.
Holler at your boys, madmenradio.com. You know, like, subscribe, all those kind of good things. It helps out the algorithm if you just hit the stupid like button.
Hit the like button
Just
and
do it, man. It helps the brothers out.
give us a forward word or forward sentence of how much you love us or hate us.
Do a little something, man. Engage with us. Holler at your boys. And until next time, we'll make sure we keep doing the good work for all of you guys out there.
Until then, Madman out.